Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Rise Together conversation. Today, I have a very special guest with me, one of my dear soul sisters, Kate, and she is an amazing being. She is an energy healer. She has had a successful yoga business. She does breath work. She does all these amazing things. I'll let her tell you a bit more about herself, but I'm really, really delighted to be having this conversation with her today. And we're going to be talking about a really juicy, I feel, a really juicy topic of the rhythms of life, and honoring the inevitability of our inner and outer cycles. So, yes.
Hello.
Hi, Kate. Thank you so much for
Mhm.
being here with me today.
It's so good to be with you, Lindsay. Thank you for having me.
So, do you want to just start by sharing a little about your work or your arriving here?
Yeah, so what a journey it's been. So I like to tell people that I've sort of had so far 3 major phases of my inner and healing work that I've done. So in my teens, actually, I found yoga and was teaching full time by the time I was about 24. And I like to say I really mastered the body through asana, through postures in my 20s. And breath work as well too, as being sort of a modality of the body. And then in my 30s, I really dove much deeper into the philosophy of yoga and the Yoga Sutras, and had a wonderful teacher who really interfaced the traditional teachings of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras with positive psychology, which is still a very new field, but 15 years ago was really new. And I like to say in my 30s, I mastered the mind, right? And beliefs and stories and, the secret and all those things that we know. And then I had my daughter kind of in my very late 30s. And then in my 40s now I'm moving into exploration and hopefully maybe one day mastery, I don't know, of energy, right? And so I think I've moved from the gross to the subtle in my own journey, which is kind of interesting, like decade by decade, systematically. And so for the last 5 years, my life has really been just immersed in energy work, energy reading, more breath work as a very, very deep tool for transformation. Teach some shamanic breath work. And lately, my newest passion has also been weaving in elements of human design. And I think a lot of what we'll speak about today will come kind of through me, but from my human design teacher, which is Karen Curry Parker. So I want to give her credit because a lot of, I think what we're going to talk about today are things that she's kind of passed on to me, and I will share my own experience of it as well. So that's where I'm at, constantly navigating this little human school that we're all in together, and trying to have a lot of fun doing it.
Well, I'm excited. I'm excited to dive in and to learn from you as we enter into the waters of this conversation. And I love that, you started with the different layers of your journey, but, it's also like these different layers of our healing process as well, like the body, the mind, the emotional body, the energetic body. Yeah, it's sort of like the cycles and rhythms within the cycles and rhythms.
Right. Right.
Sorts.
And we can keep going with that, probably a few more layers.
Yeah. So I want to, begin by, when we were connecting a few weeks ago, having this conversation, this coffee chat, and you were kind of sharing with me about, the different cycles of healing and how we go through these different processes at different times. Do you want to maybe start with sharing a little bit about that?
So I was taught with you in the energy school that we did together, and this was kind of news to me at the time. This is several years ago. And maybe I think probably a lot of your viewers are pretty hip to this idea of expansion and contraction, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's, I find, what tends to be typically taught in a lot of healing work or energy work, right? That we go through some big breakthrough and we have a big expansion and a big up level in our health and our relationships and our business and our resourcing, right? And then, there is inevitable contraction after that. And some of that's very normal, but some of that, needs to be kind of tempered. So like we can talk about like upward limits, I think is always a very interesting conversation about, how do I keep from expanding and then like contracting back to nothing,
Mm-hmm.
and I like those conversations, and I don't disagree with that model at all. And as a model, I would say I've followed for many years. It's helpful, but I've kind of learned this refinement of that model, which kind of shows 3 phases in life. And it really resonated with me because I'm really in one of them right now and have been for a while. And when this model was introduced to me by Karen, it really explained a lot for me, which is the idea that there's 3 cycles. There's disruption first,
Mm.
right? So disruption can be, I'll talk about them and name them as they come. So disruption can be cataclysmic sometimes, right? It can be the death of a loved one. It can be a divorce. It can be a huge health crisis. It can also be very happy things like getting married or having a baby or becoming a grandmother for the first
Yeah,
time.
we just moved into a new home, and that was
Yep.
very disruptive.
Absolutely. That's a great example. And it can be chosen, right? So like you weren't evicted. You and your partner consciously made this choice to
Right.
leave the home you were in, move, several months over and find this new beautiful sanctuary that you're in now. I did the same thing across country, almost 2 years ago, right? So the disruption can be cataclysmic. It can be hard. It can be wonderful, still disruptive, right? It can be chosen and mindful and very deliberate, and it can be out of our hands, right?
Mm-hmm.
As it often is. So that's phase 1, the disruption. And disruption's hard because it's really hard for me because I always want to get right into the healing. Like, okay, this thing happened, let's heal it. And it doesn't always work like that, right? So I had my sister-in-law actually said to me years ago, she said, you can't educate, this is what she told me, you can't educate or you can't help people, right? You can't counsel people when they're actually in the muck, right?
Mm.
Like when you're in those acute phases of disruption, you typically, they can be traumatic, right? So we know the mind functions differently when we're under trauma, the body functions differently, our hormonal system functions differently. So it's really not a ripe time at all to, be reading self-help books or doing counseling. Like sometimes we just have to go through the disruption
Yeah.
and then get into phase 2.
And I don't know if you found this, but I consider this past year, the dark goddess was really courting me, and I was learning a lot from her. And that was actually one of the things that inspired me to contact you to have this conversation, because I had saw your Black Friday post and you
Right.
mentioned the darkness and
Right.
with the holidays. And one of the things that I've noticed, in this year is, so as I'm like in this destruction, things sort of like being asked to surrender, my healing process looked a lot different than when I am in one of those places where I'm trying to expand.
Mm.
Like, you know, and typically I am one of those people that likes to like reach for the expanding, healing. Like, let's just work on money and let's work on like getting your business into alignment. And
Right.
what my process really looked like this year was these old layers of maybe when I did experience trauma as a child or at different times in my life, those were coming forward. And so as I'm like experiencing, this deconstruction of, where I am right now, I was also noticing and experiencing these layers of myself that maybe experienced a so for me, moving when I was 5, right? So I'm moving as an adult now, but I'm like having these feelings from when I was 5 years old that I didn't even get to feel or experience. And so it was like really a trippy, interesting like process, right? And it was a lot different from when, we are in the type of healing where we're like actively
Right.
clearing and doing these things to like move to the next layer.
Yeah. It's a good reminder that life is a marathon, not a sprint.
Totally.
Right? Life is long. It really is. And there is time for all that healing. But some of us are a little more coded for the speed. And I don't really like speed in general in life, but the speed of expansion, I think, is a thing. And it doesn't always serve us. And I think our souls have a totally different timeline if they follow time at all, and so often we can be in our late 20s or 30s and be healing something that happened 2 decades ago. And that's the way it is. We're very, I would say we're probably never healing when we're in the trauma, right? We might heal a week after, probably rarely, a month after, maybe, depending on the trauma. And I think the deeper the trauma and the deeper the conditioning that was created, right? So I'm going to guess maybe something like, you did not feel safe to have the difficult emotions that you had when you were 5, when you were moving. They were not encouraged. They were not embraced. You may have even had someone tell you no or stop it, or right. And so that's not just trauma. That's trauma that then you create conditioning around, right?
The patterns and the protections and all the
Absolutely.
layers.
And
Totally.
just like, the layers of the earth, right? And, things, the pressure and the time and the pressure and the time and the pressure and the time, then all of a sudden it's a couple decades later and this comes up and it's deep. It's deep, it's systemic, and it takes a while to move through, we should all been allowed to, just cry and throw a fit when we were 5, right? But most of us weren't.
So
and it comes back to us.
What do you say? Like, so when we're in these deconstruction times, there's also these places in our energy system, maybe where we have had these patterns and protections and layers that are sort of also being disconstructed. It's like our outer world might be going through a disconstruction, and then our inner world,
right, is reflecting the outer world, which is usually the case, right?
Yeah.
With everything all the time, right? That our inner and our outer worlds are constantly mirroring each other. And sometimes you don't know which came first, the chicken or the egg, but they're all wanting to be, I think, looked at, So if I think we both agree, like if something's coming forward, it's coming forward because you're ready. You're ready to look at it. You're ready to heal it. You're ready to up level. You're ready to clear it, whatever it is. So definitely.
Yeah. And I just want to name this last piece before we like move to the next. One of the things that I noticed for myself, and I want to name this for people because, as I was in this deconstruction phase, even being asked to let go of things in my business, there can be like these layers of, because society moves at such a different pace, the external society, we can like put this pressure on ourselves, like we're doing something wrong, or there could be like shame about the process. And it sort of adds like this resistance to the process as well, right? Or like if we're trying to sort of like get out of the process when source is like guiding us and our soul is guiding us to this thing, it can create sort of like this resistance of sorts.
Totally. So now you're moving on to phase 2. You're talking about phase 2 already, which is great. So that's awesome. So phase 2 would be liminality, right? The space between, right? So it's phase 2. It's between 1 and 3. And often we like to refer to liminality as the void, right? It's this, and I think that's kind of what you were alluding to, is like the disruption usually is pretty quick, like somebody dies, you have to have a funeral, there's that initial intensity. And I don't mean to like belittle this at all, but pretty quickly you're in that void. And whereas the disruption might last I don't know, a week, a 2 week, that void can last years. Moving is the same thing, right? You probably only had, I don't know, a week of packing, 1 or 2 days of moving, a couple days of intense unpacking, but that void afterwards, right, where stuff is still moving inside of you and still wanting to be looked at, that phase can last a very long time. So the void is this space between where we often feel empty, depressed, stuck, I think is a really good word, uninspired, lacking guidance. I mean, it can manifest in many ways. We can maybe jump the gun and try and start some things like maybe like, I'm just going to launch this program tomorrow, and then it fails. So we can have these kind of cycles of disruption and void within the void, right? Because usually what the void is asking us to do, and again, I want to be clear that, well, I think you and I have talked about, like, we've both had a pretty voidish year in many aspects of our life,
Right.
but you can't just have it in one aspect, right? So like we were speaking right before we started the recording, like you can be doing great in your business and your resourcing going really well, and meaning for work is great, and your relationship is going well, but you might be in the throes of like, dealing with breast cancer, right? And so I want to make that distinction, is that sometimes the disruption and the void can compartmentalize themselves into aspects of our life, and still it's always affecting us, right? Like if we're sick, it's in some way going to permeate all the layers of the self. So regardless how the void is manifesting or showing up in our lives, I think it's always asking us to sort of lean back and take a bigger perspective, and to slow down, right? To adopt this idea of like life is long, and right. And here's the part that we're not so great at, is to really nourish ourselves, right? To really deeply nourish ourselves so that we are restored for the next thing. Because sometimes, like if we were to like lose a job or launch a bunch of programs that then don't go anywhere, that's actually the result of not like poor planning or bad ideas, or we're a horrible teacher or a bad employee or anything. A lot of times it's the result of burnout. And I think this was your last topic, right? What, for the way I've been taught, is burnout is very often your soul's way, or the universe's way of saying, oh honey, you need a break. You need a break. Let's take this thing away from you so that you can focus on you and really nourish and restore yourself for the next thing that's going to be way bigger than this thing that you currently think is so important, right? And it can be tricky because, like, if we were to lose our job, or to start to reduce our income by a lot because programs aren't working or clients are falling away, like, it's hard to see that as a blessing, right? It's hard to see that as a love note from the universe, but often that's what it is.
Yeah. And again, I mentioned in my video that I did on burnout, I feel like it's another conversation that it's wrapped in so much shame, because there's a way that we can feel like, oh, well, I was doing something wrong. Maybe I was working too much, or we create all these stories about like why we're even burnout and all this. And really, like you're saying, it's like the void is a natural process.
Right.
It's a natural part of the creation process. And yeah, I think there's like this deep listening that's we really have to take it as an invitation to go in and to connect deeper to ourselves and to source, and just explore like what's being really asked of us here.
Right.
And what is the opportunity, right? Because it is a gift. It is a blessing in many ways.
Right. And so back to kind of larger, like inner and outer cycles, right? So we're recording this right before winter solstice. Your viewers might see it just after winter solstice. And my daughter goes to a Waldorf school, which is a very anthroposophical kind of nature-based school. And so we tend to read stories in line with the seasons. And so we're reading a lot of stories right now about seeds, right?
Mm.
And how like acorns get like pushed down into the darkness, into the dirt, into the muck. It's nobody's there. They feel alone. Like there's all this pressure and it's cold and, you know, they're just alone and they just, you know, like the world is ending, right? But then springtime comes, right? Which is going to be our third cycle, which is expansion. Inevitably the springtime will come, right? The expansion will come and you get an oak tree, right? So, you know, out of this teeny tiny little acorn. So, the season that we're all in right now of like the fallow time, the going in time, the Higgy holiday time, just kind of curling up with a book or nothing, staring at a fire for an hour, right? And the do nothingness that is not, you know, indicative of our current conditioning and culture right now is so important in the void, right? To eventually get to that third stage of expansion and true growth and up leveling and starting to see some of the things that, you know, it is that we're desiring in our lives, and we do want to consciously create with source.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love that. James was watching a video on hydroponics a few days ago, and it was a time lapse of like showing the plants with the light cycle and then the dark cycle. And actually during the dark, you know, the plants were like wobbling and like kind of reaching, and you could see that that's actually where they're getting stronger,
Mm.
you know, because they're kind of like swaying around and like, you know, expanding to try to find the light. And so then when the light comes, then they're like ready to receive it and take it in. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We say like with big trees, like, you know, you're not supposed to water them. Big trees and, you know, pines and oak trees, like you're not supposed to go out with your hose or turn the sprinkler system on for them, right? You want them to go deep. You want them to take
Mm.
those roots and have to work so they get that continual nourishment that they created themselves, as opposed to like waiting, you know, for
If
somebody else
someone else
to.
is doing it for you.
That's right. Right. And we
I
can
love
make
that.
that same analogy with like external validation versus like deep knowing of your own self-worth. Right. Those are
Mm.
two very, I don't know how we got here, but those are two very
I
kind of
love it.
opposing forces at times, right? I mean, I know I'll speak for myself. Like I know that I've gone through huge phases in my life where I'm constantly seeking out that external feedback of like, am I okay? Am I doing this right? Like, is this working? Am I working? You know? And
Yeah.
it's like a drug, you know, it's a bind to be on when your self-worth, which is supposed to come from the inside, not the outside. I mean, praise and admiration statements are great. I'm not discouraging those at all. But when we rely on them
Right.
exclusively because there's no inner well of like, I rock, you know, I'm a cool cat. Like, let's go. It is like a drug that we tend to, you know, start to get addicted to and need all the time. And then when we don't get it, right, then that can really kind of plummet us back into a period of disruption,
Mm.
right? If all of a sudden we feel no self-worth in our relationship because our, you know, partner isn't constantly validating us, right, we start to go into very dark places of like, this isn't working and this isn't the relationship for me and I need to seek out something else. And, you know, when really the inner work isn't there.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things I love about being able to sort of identify these cycles. Like
Mm.
it creates so much permission, right? Because it's
Mm.
like if we allow ourselves to rest in the cycle, the larger rhythm, the larger flow of the unraveling that's happening, there could be a natural safety in that. And then we can like let some of that pressure off of ourself, of us
Right.
doing it wrong or not being good enough or not being worthy enough, why, you know, we're not getting the results we want. And really it's like you're in the void. And so the point is to learn to kind of, you know, find that validation for yourself or find like your individual self in the aloneness or whatever the lesson is
Mm-hmm.
that you're receiving at that moment.
Yes. So can we talk about maybe a few tips for the void?
Sure.
Yeah. So back to burnout. I mean, I think that's such an important topic, and to um, understand that very often, not always, but very often, that the two are linked, that the void has something to do with burnout, sometimes completely, right? And usually we know when that happens, we're so burned out. Like we're like, okay, I'm burnt out. There's no question. But sometimes it's more subtle. And I got to go back and watch your video now because I want to see what you said about burnout. But I think it's important to note that burnout is not just tiredness, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not just fatigue. It's usually coupled with some hopelessness, with a lack of inspiration, with a lack of belief that things can be any different or better, that growth is possible, right? Um, and so there's no question that burnout is usually associated with tiredness, and that in the void, we should be getting very good quality rest. So sleep and rest, and sleep and rest is not being the same thing, right? So I like to teach my clients, like, is it four? There's like four different kind of activities in life. There's sleep, there's work, there's leisure, and then there's rest.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to get, these days I'm seeing it's the leisure and the rest that get muddled, right? So leisure is like sports, listening to music, binging on Netflix, right? None of those are like inherently bad things.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a certain level of restoration that comes from leisure activities, right? But don't confuse it for rest, right? And so for me, rest is like sitting on a couch near a window and just looking out the window, or better yet, if the weather's good, being outside and just sitting under a tree. And it's those do nothing stages. I like to use breath work and yoga nidra as a little bit more active ways to rest. I know that sounds contradictory, but if resting is really hard for us, sometimes we need to trick the mind a little bit and give it something to do to reach those phases of rest. But again, rest is not sleep. So it's this tricky little, again, liminal place where we're not really taught this fourth component of like, yes, sleep, yes, work, yes, have leisure activities. And you have to actively engage in this fourth component in our life, which is like deliberate rest. Deliberate rest is important. So no question, burnout, void, we need to rest. But there are some other things that we can do that are really important. So I think I'll name three. So the first, and one of my favorites, because it's usually pretty easy to do, is surround yourself with beauty. Beauty is a really important way to nourish ourselves at a soul level, at a heart level, when we're not feeling great. Okay. And beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? So beauty means something different to everyone else. So that could be going to an art gallery. That can be going to a botanical garden. That can be sitting at the beach. It could be sitting in your backyard and watching the robins, right? It can be the artistic way you make a meal, right? It can be the artistic way that you arrange your pillows when you make your bed in the morning, right? It certainly can be arts and craft too. We're all designed to be creative in that way, and many more. It can be listening to music, right? Put on some beautiful concerto and Baroque concerto and just listen to that. So consciously seeking out and creating beauty in your life, I would say, is number one way to get through the void. The second one is not that far away from it, which is pleasure, which is actively engaging in things that just make you feel good. And so we like to say in life, but particularly in the void, like if it doesn't feel good, if it doesn't feel fun, if it has no juiciness attached to it, don't do it. say no, don't do it. Right. So again, the foods that you're eating, the clothes that you're putting on, how your bedroom feels, where you walk. Maybe you take a 40-minute walk every day, but you don't really love your neighborhood. Maybe you need to get in the car and drive 10 minutes so you can be walking in a park or a garden that really enlivens you and surrounds you with beauty and, you know, smells better and sounds better, right? And the air you're breathing is better. So you can experience that
I
pleasure.
can tell you, you know, from moving from where we were to like where we are now. And like, you know, I was walking before, and being in town around people that are actually like moving around and they're happy and they're cheerful, like it makes such a huge difference.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So your environment, who you surround yourself with.
Yeah.
And I'll just put on there that I do think movement is always really important. I mean, we were given these little suits for a reason. We are not meant to be sedentary. And so I don't want to go on some, you know, exercise tangent, but find a form of movement that works for you, i.e. is pleasurable to you. So whether it's walking or gardening or swimming, I use a rebounder, which I love. I basically dance on a rebounder. Dance, and I don't mean, you know, dance classes, although if that works for you, great. I mean, shutting the door, putting some headphones on, or cranking up the music and just moving your body however it wants to, especially for women, is a powerful, powerful way to move our body in pleasure. So I'll kind of just put that add on with number 2, pleasure, like find a pleasurable way to move and move every day, you know, in a way that feels good. Now I'm going to forget number 3. Wow. We'll have to talk about something else for a second. Anything else you want to say about pleasure?
Would it have been moving your body or like
No.
getting in your body? No. Okay.
No. Oh, yes. No, thank you. You reminded me. Thank you. So, this is the hard one for me. That's why I forgot.
Okay.
This is a really hard one for me, but it is, and if you want to see expansion, you're going to have to cultivate this,
Okay.
which is cultivating faith.
Mm.
Actively creating states of faith and hope and belief and trust in your soul and your higher self and the universe and the quantum field, that you will get through this. You will see expansion and things will be better, right? So the number one way we like to do this is just practicing dreaming. But I use the word, and this is not for everyone. I don't love the word dreaming. I think it makes us think too much of sleep. I think in our society, we've crossed the words dream and goals a lot. So if you don't have those associations, good, use the word dream. If the word dream for you works for you. But I think really the word that is right for a lot of us is fantasize.
Yeah, because we like take our visualizing or daydreaming and we like try to attach it to the goal of what we're wanting, and then there's like this work energy to it rather than like really the open expansiveness.
That's right. And to say back to speed and to say exactly what you said in another way is we tend to, again, twist inspiration with action. Like as soon as I'm inspired, I must go take action, right? Like as soon as I'm on the rebounder and I have an idea about a program, I need to go create the content, create the coursework, make a price for it, and send it out to all my clients within, an hour of it, right? So, and that's not really how we work as human beings. Like we need to just be in the inspiration, like a bath. We just need to steep in it for a while. And again, life is long, right? So slow down and be in those states of fantasy and dreaming and inspiration, for a period of time. And then in human design, we like to say and we're really always getting our best feedback from our external world, meaning see what shows up. See what actually shows up around you, and let that help inform you on what needs to come next or the timing of what needs to come in. So instead of just like idea in the head, act, idea in the head, act, like be with the idea, wait, fantasize about the idea, see how it might morph and change, let it make you feel really good, and then see how someone just magically shows up in your life and goes, have you ever thought about, teaching a class on blah, blah, blah? And then that's when
It's
okay.
time.
Thank you. Right. Yeah, definitely.
I love it.
I would say this just came to me last night. So I will share this. So we didn't say we would actively do a practice, but here's one that I can describe pretty quickly that I think would be easy for your viewers to do. So like I've this week really been struggling with faith in a couple areas in my life. And so I spent a lot of last night not sleeping, but it was good because I essentially created a temple of faith energetically in my head. And I visualized myself, and for me, it was this round temple. And in it, I kind of created and placed every time in my life, I thought I was doomed. I thought this relationship wasn't going to work out. I thought I would never have a client again. I thought I wouldn't be able to pay my mortgage, whatever, right? And then like some magic happened and it totally worked out. And I saw myself re-feeling those experiences and placing them in my energetic temple of faith, like stained glass windows, like stations of the cross almost, and just being in that space of like, I've had some hardship in my life and it's worked out every time. I'm still here, I'm still here. I'm still happy. I'm still well. I'm still in relationships. And chances are this is going to be the same thing, right? There's no evidence that I actually have that says I'm going to die or be homeless or never have a friend again. There's really no evidence showing me that. All the evidence shows me this is going to work out. I don't know how. I don't know when. I don't have the solution for it. My mind can't figure out the solution for it, even though, we've been conditioned to think I must figure it out. I must figure it out. It's actually not how it works. And if I can just keep cultivating this graceful state of faith and trust in the universe, I'm probably going to expedite my voidness quite a bit, right? So when the void happens, it happens, and we're not in control of it. But I do think that there are things that we can do to help smooth the pathway and speed us along through the void a little bit, influence some divine timing. Yeah. And so beauty, pleasure, cultivating states of faith.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I want to invite our listeners, if you feel like you're in the void, maybe pick at least one, pick one of these things to, it could feel overwhelming when we're in that state to do multiple of them, but pick one that you're willing to just try and explore and maybe commit to it for a week and just see what happens.
Yeah. And I think if I can just add, I think beauty is the easiest. Because the truth is we are surrounded by beauty, right? It's just a matter of sometimes like cleaning off our lenses a little bit and actually seeing it. So probably most people who are watching this live in a pretty safe place, live in a place where they can go outside or, interface with nature, and it's there. So you don't have to create it from nothing. Just open your eyes to it, open your heart to it. Yeah.
I love connecting with my cats, like just letting them, tickle my heart.
Absolutely. Animals, children, beautiful way to do it.
So good. And it could be as simple as a cup of coffee or tea as well.
Yep.
Enjoying the aromas, the smell, the taste, all of it.
Yep, absolutely.
So, do you want to talk about expansion? What do you feel about that? Or do you want to just maybe say a little about it?
I think expansion is the simplest of them, right? Because it feels good. Usually, I think tell me if you agree with this. I think usually expansion takes like a sort of autopilot. And it's almost like this like beautiful wave we just get swept off on. And so I would say probably the most important thing for expansion is to follow the flow, like we were talking about, to just go where it takes you. Because it never, I mean, even if, let's say you want to build a business and, you know, you do the things to build the business and nobody comes and you're in this void, right? And then something happens because you surrounded yourself with beauty and pleasure and states of faith. All of a sudden you have this huge growth in your business. Chances are it's not going to look exactly like the way you envisioned it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Usually it looks better or easier or even bigger. So don't try to micromanage expansion, right? Like follow the flow, trust that the energy of it, and cultivate states of stability, right? So that you can maintain it as much as possible.
What's coming to me too is like, you can say if you feel this is true or not, but you know, sometimes when we're moving like from the void to the expansion, it can feel, I feel like that's kind of the place that I'm in right now. And, you know, there is a practice of staying open,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because I think if we do close off, then we could go back into the void and have to spend some more time there. And so I don't know if there's anything you want to say about that.
Yeah, well, I think sometimes especially if we've been in the void a while, it can feel a little bit like an engine revving itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, here we go. Oh, we're not going anywhere yet. Here we go. Wait, are we going? Are we moving yet? You know? And I think that's normal, right? So to understand that, you know, almost like a rocket ship, you know, at blast off, how it can be kind of like for a while, and then you're in orbit and you're like, oh, this is fantastic, right? So I think if you or any of your viewers feel that sometimes there is a little bit of a rocky transition between the void and expansion, again, especially when you've been in the void a while, I think that's very normal and you just need to ride it out. And we also say that when it comes to like, certainly even like global evolution, you know, I think about human beings, consciousness evolving, right? But we're just, you know, microcosms of the macrocosms. There is this idea that it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And there's a reason for that, right? Which is without some level of conservatism, without some level of actually wanting to hold on to the way it is, we would never have any course correction, right? So just to like expand for the sake of expansion, it has its own problems. So that's why we kind of tend to take 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So we're constantly evaluating, oh, did that work for me? Oh, might I want to do that again, but tweak it a little bit? We're still 1 step forward from where we started, right? But there's a natural course correction that's happening through expansion that I also think is totally normal and doesn't always have to feel hard and disruptive and, you know, horrible, right? But I do think that 2 steps forward, 1 step back, if you or anyone else ever feels that, is 100% normal and even, you know, pretty sattvic in a very refined way to experience sustainable expansion. Yeah.
Yes.
Good stuff.
It is. I'm so grateful for you and for all this wealth of knowledge that you're sharing with us.
Yes, thank you. So fun.
So, is there anything else that you want to share with our viewers today before we close?
Yeah, I'll say this came to me shortly before we got on today. Back to the darkness, right? And back to solstice and wintertime and going within. You know, I know you're privy to, and our fellow sister Anna Dale just made that great quote yesterday about darkness and how, you know, 3 cheers for darkness, like it's a thing, basically was the quote. And there are some circles, right, that do what we might call spiritual bypassing and just want to focus on the light and not honor the darkness at all. And so here's what came to me this morning is that we know at a soul level, we're all one, right? That's the nature of the soul. That's the nature of source from which we came and are. That's the nature of divinity, whatever you want to call it. But the fact of the matter is we're not back with source. We consciously chose to incarnate into these human suits to have this human school experience. And we live in a polarity universe, period. Might our polarity universe change at some point? Light, dark, hot, cold, male, female, black, white. Might it change at some point? It might. I'm pretty sure I'm not going to see it in my lifetime. I'm pretty sure you're not going to see it in your lifetime. Right now, our universe is based on polarity. And so if there is lightness, if there is light, then there has to be dark as well. And in those poles, right, they're just archetypes. Archetypes are by their nature neutral. There is no judging or labeling or critiquing of archetypes. They just are, right? We might put meanings on archetypes, but inherently they are neutral. And so we know we will have both. We will have the light and we will have the dark. And they are both to be honored. They are both valuable. They're both here to be experienced, probably in pretty equal measures. And we signed up for this. We all signed up for it. So there's the more we eschew the darkness, right? I think we're creating the suffering, right? We say pain is inevitable, suffering is optional, right? Yeah. And it's usually the resistance to something that creates the suffering. So when we resist the darkness, because we have labels and stories and conditioning around darkness is bad, feeling down is bad, whatever, then that's where the suffering is actually coming from. It's not coming from the darkness. It's coming from the meaning, the conditioned meaning we've put on the darkness. So I invite everyone in this season to look at physical darkness, political darkness, economic darkness, internal personal darkness, maybe in a new way.
Yeah. And I love the nature metaphors because I really feel nature is such a great teacher around this, just because there is no right or wrong, right? Like things die and plants die. And when they do die, it just creates fertile ground for the next thing to grow. And so, yeah, we mourn it, we grieve it, and we also celebrate it. And I was listening to an astrology thing yesterday, and he was talking about, ripening fruits. And, there's a moment where it's like it ripens, and then it's ready to be eaten, and if you wait too long, then it's going to start to die.
Yeah.
And so it really, it's part of the process, and it's the juiciness of life.
That's right. That's right. Beautifully said.
I love you so much. I'm so grateful for you. Yeah. So you can send me your info, but if you want to tell people how they can connect with you, you can say that. And then I'll also post it in the comments of the video so they can get it there as well.
So my website is Radically Kate. So radicallykate.com. You can email me, kate@radicallykate.com. But come visit me over there and send me a love note, and love to hear from anyone who feels called to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you. I love you.
I love you. Take care.
Bye.